Hello YouTubers out there, this is Jerry TV. Today I'm going to talk about The View, specifically Season 15, which started about 2 weeks ago. Now, just to backtrack a little bit, I started watching The View back in 2005. This is when they had the War of the Worlds actors, the Steven Spielberg remake, Tim Robbins and Tom Cruise. And they came on the show, and at the time I thought, well, this is just a frothy little confection of a show. I didn't think too much of it, I didn't think too little of it, but, and I normally didn't watch daytime TV, so it was kind of an anomaly for me. But as time wore on, I watched more of The View, and then I became somewhat interested when Rosie-O'Donnell took over as the host for the show. Now, Rosie, I was not always very keen on. I mean, I admire her acting, particularly some of her films like A League of Their Own and Another Stakeout and films of that nature. I never watched the Rosie-O'Donnell show that she had done way back when, but I do remember, or I had remembered the controversy that erupted after the day after the Columbine killings. This is going back in 1999, and the guest that she had on the day after was Tom Selleck, who himself was a member of NRA, and she started to grill him. How dare you be a member of the NRA and this sort of thing. And in those days, she was pushing for gun control laws. So the Queen of Nice was known a little bit as the suddenly, not exactly Queen of Mean, but almost, or maybe not very nice. But actually she always has been an outspoken advocate for all sorts of social issues, but politically it looked like she was even more inclined than she had been previously, which she had freely admitted on the Bill O'Reilly show. So I started watching Rosie when she appeared on The View in 2006, and what I gathered from the show was that there was an air of unpredictability. There was some electricity in the air, because this is, after all, a live daytime talk show. At the time was the only, I believe, live daytime talk show. The other one now that is live is Wendy Williams, which is on at 10 a.m., and that's live. But for a while, The View was the only live daytime talk show. In fact, it's really one of the very few shows that is live, period. So, when I started watching, I noticed that obviously, her adversary was Elisabeth-Hasselbeck, who is, of course, still on the show. She is the Republican of the co-host panel. Of course, you have Joy Behar, the outspoken comedian. Not nearly as outspoken, I must say, as Rosie-O'Donnell. And at one time you had Star Jones, but now you have Sherri-Shepherd, and of course Barbara Walters, who is somewhat neutral. Sherri-Shepherd being the religious member of the group. Anyway, when Rosie was on, again, it was an air of unpredictability. You didn't know what was going to happen. She made all sorts of controversial comments, in particular about the war on terrorism, Bush's policies, and so on, and the Iraq War. And Elisabeth had issues with many of the things that Rosie said, and of course this led to a meltdown back in June of 2007. And ultimately, Rosie's contract was up 2 weeks later, and she left 2 weeks early. So that was the end of Rosie. But she was very outspoken. And it was kind of it was a novelty to see such an outspoken woman on all sorts of issues. Whether or not you agreed with Rosie, you had to give her credit for speaking her mind. Now with the View, Whoopi is now the host. And she is outspoken, but she's much more restrained, which is fine. And they've had some interesting episodes since Rosie's exit. In particular, the presidential race of 2008. Barack Obama appearing on the program, everyone from Barack to John McCain, and Coulter. And they grilled John McCain fairly... they grilled him pretty hard, and but you know, it made sense too. They didn't grill, I think, Barack Obama nearly as hard. Elisabeth did, and you know, it's become a political show. It didn't start out that way. The View, when it first debuted in 1997, since I think Rosie took over, it became much more politically inclined. In fact, anytime there is a political issue on the show that's discussed, it gets mentioned in the news. In particular, about a year ago, when Bill O'Reilly made some remarks about the Muslims, saying the Muslims started 9/11, or were responsible for 9/11, and Whoopi and Joy basically exited off the stage, which, seems to be a bit of a cliche. A lot of people are doing that now. Andrew Dice Clay, a few years back, did the same thing on some MSNBC show. So anyway, it's even happened on the Joy Behar show. But the issue I have with The View now, in particular in the new season, is that it feels a little safe, a little sanitized. I mean, not to say that they don't cover all sorts of controversial issues, but when Rosie was on, you didn't know what was going to happen. You didn't know what Rosie was going to say. See, this new crew, and by new I mean Whoopi, of course, and Sherri-Shepherd, and Joy, they stick to the standards and practices. Television has standards and practices. There are lists of things you can and cannot say on television. Rosie violated all of them. I mean, she did. Let me tell you, if she was still on the show and Dick Cheney was being interviewed, she probably wouldn't be up there on the stage listening in. She just couldn't just sit there and listen. Obviously, Dick Cheney was on about a week ago, and I believe this was a taped show, which disappointed me. I don't really care for the Friday shows because they're taped, and, it's missing, again, that air of electricity that you get when it's live. That anything can happen type of vibe. So, but when Dick Cheney was on, he obviously felt the Iraq War was justified, and he gave a list of reasons, and at one point Whoopi was ready to ask him, but, and then, cut to commercial. Joy Behar was fairly silent through the whole thing, and, she's, also a leftist, so of course she didn't agree with the Iraq War. The show seems to just feel a little safer now, it's a little too civilized. I'm not saying that I want angry, loud matches, or a lot of crosstalk. I don't want too much of that, because we had that back when CNN was broadcasting Crossfire, and that show got canned. And mostly because of all the crosstalk. No, you couldn't hear one opinion from the other. It just felt like it was all, a visual and a oral blur. So, but with this View, I guess I just don't want it to be too civilized. In the last couple of weeks, the one interview that stuck out the most was when they had Michael Moore on. He was promoting his new book, which discusses his life, I guess, since childhood. And Michael Moore made a comment that bin Laden's death was nothing to be sing praises about. And Elizabeth took issue and says, we did the right thing, he should have been killed. And then we suddenly got some of that friction and unease that we once had when Rosie and Elisabeth were at it. But the show seems to lack that for the most part. It gives the show an edge that it didn't have when it first debuted. I don't think when Barbara Walters first made this show happen that she envisioned what it would become. And I missed that edge. So guys, if you ever are listening to my show, and you probably are not, I would recommend give it more of an edge. I'm not, little less civility. Show us what it is you really think. And don't let standards and practices get in the way too much. Not to say that Whoopi, doesn't slip in a word or two here and there, that I'm sure the censors are not happy about, but it lacks that air of unpredictability that I think the show once had when Rosie was on. You never knew what was going to happen with Rosie. So I missed that. And I would say, please bring in Mel Gibson. Have him as a guest. Let's really bring this show. When Rosie was on, it felt alive. I don't know how else to put it, and I'm sure many people will disagree, but it felt alive. It felt like, you felt like there was somebody on the panel who spoke the truth about what they really honestly felt, and that was Rosie-O'Donnell. So, love her or hate her, she spoke the truth. So, anyway, I'm hoping I will continue watching. I always do. The View is on every day, 10 a.m. 11 a.m. on ABC, Monday through Friday. But I skip the Friday shows. So, there you have it. I will discuss more about The View as the season goes on. I'm glad to do so because it's an interesting show. I just want more of an edge. That's all I'm asking. So, this is Jerry TV, signing off.